Did you know that over 30 countries, involving more than 1.7 billion people, 3/4 of the world's population, took part in World War II? This staggering statistic underscores the sheer magnitude of this global conflict. It was not just a war, it was a world-altering event that shook the very foundations of our global community. The vast number of countries involved paints a vivid picture of a world in turmoil. From the icy tundra of Siberia to the sun-scorched deserts of North Africa, from the bustling cities of Europe to the tranquil islands of the Pacific, World War II connected corners of the globe in a shared experience of conflict and survival. The human element is even more astounding. Consider 1.7 billion individuals, each with personal stories, hopes and fears, caught in the maelstrom of war. That's 3 out of every 4 people on the planet at the time. Now imagine a conflict of such scale, spanning across continents, and you'll begin to grasp the enormity of World War II. On a fateful day, September 1st, 1939, the world was plunged into the second global conflict within a generation. The cause? The invasion of Poland by Germany. This act of aggression was a blatant disregard for the Treaty of Versailles, which had ended the First World War. It was a move that signaled the start of a new global conflict, one that would soon engulf the world. Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, had been expanding its territory for years. Hitler's aim was to establish a new German empire, built on the principles of racial purity and absolute obedience to the state. The invasion of Poland was just the next step in his grand plan, but the world was not ready to stand by and watch. Britain and France, 2 of the largest and most powerful nations in the world at the time, declared war on Germany in response to the invasion of Poland. They were not alone. Countries from around the globe began to take sides, forming alliances that would define the course of the war. The key players in this early stage of the war included not only Germany, Britain and France, but also Italy, Japan, the Soviet Union and the United States. Each of these nations had its own agendas, its own reasons for getting involved in the conflict. Germany and Italy, under the banner of fascism, sought to expand their empires. Japan, driven by its desire for resources and territorial gain, joined the Axis powers. The Soviet Union, initially allied with Germany, would later switch sides after being invaded by the very ally it had signed a non-aggression pact with. The United States, though initially maintaining a policy of neutrality, would later join the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Each move, each decision, each alliance formed during these early days of the war set the stage for what was to come. The world was about to witness a conflict unlike any before it, one that would change the course of history and reshape the geopolitical landscape. A war like no other had begun, setting the stage for a series of events that would reshape the world. By 1941, the Axis powers seemed unstoppable, but the tide of the war was about to take a dramatic turn. An unexpected event on a quiet Sunday morning in December would profoundly alter the course of World War II. The surprise military strike by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941 shocked the world, and particularly the United States, who until then had chosen to remain neutral. This attack, which resulted in significant loss of life and destruction of the Pacific Fleet, was a pivotal moment that led to the United States' entry into the war. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, another gamble was being taken. In June of 1941, German forces, breaking their non-aggression pact, launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The sheer scale of this offensive was staggering, with over 3 million German soldiers pushing into Soviet territory. The initial success of the invasion seemed to confirm the invincibility of the German war machine. However, as the Russian winter set in, the German advance slowed to a halt. The Soviet Union, under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, mounted a fierce resistance. The failure of Operation Barbarossa marked a significant turning point in the war. These 2 events, the attack on Pearl Harbor and the failure of Operation Barbarossa, had far-reaching implications. The United States, with its industrial might, brought a new level of resources and military power to the Allied side. The failed German invasion of the Soviet Union exposed the weaknesses of the Axis powers and gave hope to the Allies. With the entrance of new powerful players, the war had taken a significant turn, yet the worst was far from over. The stage was set for some of the most brutal and destructive battles in human history, as nations and ideologies clashed on a global scale. The turning tide of World War II was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards peace. By 1944, the Axis powers were on the back foot, but the cost of victory was steep. A turning point that year was the invasion of Normandy, commonly known as D-Day. This was an audacious and meticulously planned operation, intended to liberate Western Europe from Nazi control. Thousands of ships and aircraft, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers from the United States, Britain and Canada, made the perilous journey across the English Channel that day. Their courage and sacrifice led to a decisive victory, marking the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. Yet the road to victory was far from smooth. In the winter of 1944, the German army launched a surprise offensive through the densely forested Ardennes region of Belgium, France and Luxembourg. This was the Battle of the Bulge, the last major German offensive on the Western Front. Despite initial successes, the German forces were ultimately repelled by the Allies, who displayed remarkable resilience in the face of severe winter conditions and surprise attacks. The failure of this offensive marked a significant depletion of Germany's military resources and morale. As the war was drawing to a close, the leaders of the three major Allied powers, Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States, Winston Churchill of the UK, and Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, convened at the Yalta Conference. Here, they discussed the reorganization of Europe post-war and the establishment of the United Nations. This conference was a testament to the shifting power dynamics, with the end of the war in sight and the beginning of a new world order. However, the final act of this global drama was far from over. Even as the Axis powers were losing ground, the war had yet to unleash its most devastating weapon. The end was in sight, but the final act of this global drama was yet to unfold. In the summer of 1945, the world witnessed a display of power like never before, marking the end of World War II. The closing act of this global drama was set against the backdrop of two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In a bid to expedite the end of the war, the United States, following the advice of its top scientists, decided to use a weapon of mass destruction, the atomic bomb. This weapon, a product of the top-secret Manhattan Project, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It carried the destructive power of thousands of tons of TNT, capable of annihilating entire cities in the blink of an eye. On the 6th of August, 1945, the first of these bombs, codenamed Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima. The city was decimated, with an estimated 140,000 lives lost in an instant. The world watched in horror and awe as the mushroom cloud rose, marking the dawn of the atomic age. Yet, the devastation was far from over. Just 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki, causing further devastation and loss of life. The dual bombings sent shockwaves around the world, and particularly through Japan itself. The scale of destruction was unimaginable, the human cost, unbearable. It became evident that continuing the war was futile, and on August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender, effectively ending World War II. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked not only the end of the war, but also the beginning of a new era. An era where mankind possessed the means to destroy itself, an era of nuclear deterrence and the Cold War. World War II, a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation, had finally come to an end, leaving a world forever changed. The atomic conclusion had brought an era of global conflict to a close, yet it also opened a Pandora's box of new challenges and responsibilities for the world to grapple with. World War II was a complex series of events that reshaped the world as we know it. We began our journey with the outbreak of the war, a cataclysmic event that ignited the globe in a fierce conflict. It was a time of uncertainty, with nations choosing sides and alliances being formed. Then we observed the turning tide, when the balance of power began to shift. Strategies changed, alliances evolved, and the course of the war took a new direction. This was the point where hope began to glimmer amidst the chaos. Next, we delved into the period where the end was in sight. Victory was on the horizon, yet the path was fraught with challenges and sacrifices. Finally, we arrived at the atomic conclusion, a dramatic end to the war that introduced a new era of warfare and forever changed our perception of power. It's crucial to remember these events, as they serve as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of global conflict.